He thought it was a simple mission train, a mysterious squad on a forgotten moon base, and leave. But when the doors opened, he wasn't facing soldiers. He was facing 10 fox-eared alien girls raised in labs, treated like weapons, and abandoned. By their creators, they growled at him, mocked him, and waited for him to run just like every human before. But he didn't. He stayed, and when danger came, he didn't stand behind them. He stood with them, one man against the system, one broken squad, learning what it meant to be free. Soon, they stopped calling him Commander. They started calling him Alpha. And when the government came to erase them, he made a choice that would shake the galaxy. This isn't just about war. It's about family, loyalty, and love born from fire. Watch till the end, because once the pack forms, no one breaks it. Asterisk now. Let us go to the place where dust, sacrifice, and destiny first collided, where the story truly begins. Asterisk Commander Jocks Grayson stepped off the dropship with dust in his boots and a file in his hand. He had trained elite soldiers, led dangerous missions, and walked through battlefields where machines bled. But this was different. Moonbase 12 looked abandoned, quiet like a grave. He expected a team of hardened soldiers, but instead, he was told he'd be training a special unit. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside the training room stood 10 figures, all small, slim, and staring at him with wide, glowing eyes. They had furred ears, sharp tails, and animal-like movement. Fox girls, not holograms. Not simulations, real living beings who looked half wild. Half lost, one stepped forward. Her silver hair flowed like water, and her eyes were deep gold. She sniffed the air, then growled lowly. "Another human," she said, her voice cold. "You will leave like the others." Jocks didn't move. He only looked at them carefully, calmly. "You must be Kari," he said, checking the roster. "You're the squad leader." Kari narrowed her eyes. "We lead ourselves." Another girl in the back tilted her head and whispered, "He smells like dust." They giggled, but not in a friendly way. They circled Jocks slowly like predators testing prey. He kept standing still. "Your last trainer left in one day," Kari added. "He cried when we bit him." Jocks didn't laugh. "I'm not leaving," he said simply. That sentence was the first crack in their wall. Over the next hour, Jocks reviewed their test scores. Speed off the charts. Reflexes, inhuman, discipline 0. These girls had claws, skills, and fire, but no real training, just raw instincts. Shaped into weapons by someone who didn't care what happened to them later, he watched them fight in a mock battle. They moved too fast for most humans to track, but they also argued during combat, stealing kills. Ignoring orders, acting like kids playing war, Jocks blew the whistle and stopped the fight. "You're not a team," he said. "You're chaos with tails." Kari hissed. "We don't need you." He walked up to her, eyes steady. "You're not weak," he said, "but strength without control is useless." She raised her claws, daring him to flinch. He didn't. She paused, confused, then lowered her hand. A test failed in purpose, maybe, later that day. During a simulation drill, something went wrong. The flamethrower bots malfunctioned, firing real heat instead of light. One of the youngest Fox girls refroze under the blast. Jocks didn't think. He jumped into the fire zone, shielded her. With his body, rolled, grabbed, and carried her out. His arm burned. His jacket melted, but she was safe. Silence fell. The Fox girls stared at him not with distrust, but shock. No one had ever protected them before, not like that. Kari walked toward him slowly. Her sharp eyes locked onto his. She sniffed his burnt jacket, close enough to bite, but she didn't. Instead, she said softly, "Why did you do that?" Jocks looked down at Ree, still shaking in his arms. "Because that's what a leader does." He said, "He protects his pack." Kari blinked. Once, then again. The other girls stepped closer, cautiously. Not circling this time, but surrounding him with quiet curiosity. No one spoke. Even their tails stopped moving. That night, as Jock sat alone cleaning his wound, he heard the door open. Kari entered with a first aid kit, dropped it beside him, and sat across without a word. For a long time, she just watched him. Then finally, she said one sentence that changed everything. "You might be the one we don't break," Jock said. Nothing, but for the first time since landing on Moon Base 12. He smiled. The next morning, the training field was silent. The Fox girls stood in a loose line, their ears twitching and tails flicking with nervous energy. None of them spoke. They watched Jock with guarded eyes, unsure what he would do next. After all, no human had ever stayed this long. Especially not after being burned, mocked, and nearly clawed. Jock stepped onto the field without armor, without weapons, just a calm voice and a whistle around his neck. "I'm not here to control you," he said. "I'm here to teach you how to control yourselves." Kari crossed her arms, ears low. "We don't take orders." "You will," Jock said. "Not as a threat, but as a promise. Because deep down, you don't want to be wild animals anymore." That hit something. The youngest Fox girl, Ree, stepped forward and whispered. "We were born in labs, not homes." Her voice cracked. "We were trained to fight, not to feel." Jock nodded slowly. "But you can feel now," he said. "And that makes you stronger than any machine." Training began. At first, it was a mess, snarling, leaping, ignoring instructions. Jock didn't yell, didn't punish. He watched, waited, then pointed out each mistake with quiet focus. One by one, the Fox girls began listening. Not because he forced them, but because he made sense. Later that afternoon, during combat drills, Kari rushed at Jock too fast. He dodged but miscalculated and slammed into the wall. Shoulder first, Kari froze. Guilt flashing in her eyes, she ran to him, helped him sit up, and her claws shook as she touched his shoulder. "I didn't mean," she whispered. "I know." Jock said, breathing through the pain. "But next time, maim for the legs." Kari blinked. Then she laughed, a short, surprised sound, like she wasn't used to laughing. The others turned, ears perking up, tails wagging slightly. It was the first time any of them had seen her smile. That night, something strange happened. Jock walked into the mess hall and found it full. The girls were all there, sitting, waiting, quiet. Kari nodded toward the empty chair in the center. "Sit, Alpha," she said. Jock paused. "Alpha." The word echoed like it meant more than just a leader. It was a title, a bond, a place in the pack. Kari looked away, embarrassed. "It's instinct, maybe?" she muttered. "But you earned it." The girls nodded. "Some shy, some bold. We never had an alpha before," Ree whispered. "We just had trainers, watchers, and guards." Jock sat slowly, and for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. They passed him food, asked about his scars, laughed at his dry jokes. One of them even braided his hair while pretending not to. Later that night, as the base lights dimmed, Jock walked the halls alone. He needed air, space, time to think. Then he heard soft voices coming from the sleeping quarters. He stopped and listened. "Do you think he'll stay?" one asked. "He didn't flinch when Kari almost broke his ribs," said another. "He's different." Kari's voice came next, quiet but firm. "He didn't treat us like tools," she said. "He looked at us like we matter." Someone sniffled. "If he leaves, I'm going with him." Jock's hand tightened around the metal railing beside him. He hadn't come here to build a family. He came for duty, for work, for a paycheck and a file. But now, these broken girls, with fox ears and guarded hearts, they were looking at him like he was more than a man. They were looking at him like hope. He walked back to his quarters, head spinning. Inside, he found something on his bed, a small paw-shaped charm, handmade from wires and cloth. One of them must have left it there in secret. Jocks held it in his hands, stared at it for a long time. Then he placed it on his chest and lay back with a slow breath. He wasn't there alpha yet, not fully. But something had started, something deep and strange and strong. And he didn't want it to stop. Asterisk, the sun never rose on Moon Base 12. Only the cold red glow of artificial lights touched the steel corridors. The Fox girls moved better now, more in sync. More focused, they still joked and argued. But they followed Jocks's commands without hesitation. Even Kari didn't challenge him as often, though her golden eyes still burned with fire. That morning, they trained in silence. Target dummies fell under sharp kicks and tail swipes. Jocks stood at the edge, arms crossed. Again, he said calmly. And this time, no mercy. Kari grinned, her fangs sharp. You sound proud. I am, he replied. But proud doesn't win a real fight. He didn't know how true those words would become in just hours. It started with static on the comms, then flickering lights, then the sound of the perimeter alarms shrieking to life. The girls froze mid-movement, ears twitching in all directions. Jocks's face went cold, his hand flying to the emergency panel. Unknown ships breaching airspace, the AI voice said. Unauthorized entry, Class 5 threat. Kari growled low. Mercenaries. Jocks turned fast. Battle stations now. Asterisk, the base shook with impact. Explosions rang out as black-armored. Soldiers dropped in through breach pods. They were fast-real, fast but not like the Fox girls. Jocks ordered the power systems cut, plunging half the base into darkness. That's when the real fight began. Kari moved like lightning, striking from the shadows. Her tail snapped a Merc's rifle in half. Her claws tore through armor. Redarted under gunfire and disarmed 2 men before they knew she was there. The others followed in perfect rhythm, silent, brutal, efficient. Jocks moved with them, not behind them. He shot with precision, gave cover, and shouted calm, short commands. Left flank 2, incoming, re-fall backtrap corridor 4. Kari with me now. Smoke filled the air. Sparks flew, but the pack didn't break. They moved like one body, one will, one bond. Then it happened. Kari took a blast to the side. She hit the ground hard, blood dripping from her ribs. 2 Mercs moved in for the kill. Jocks didn't think. He threw himself over her, shielding her with his back. His shoulder burned from a plasma hit. But he didn't care. He fired blindly, point blank, until both enemies dropped. Kari coughed, trying to rise. Stupid Alpha, she whispered. That was reckless. You're... Welcome, Jocks muttered, dragging her behind cover. Her body trembled but her eyes. Her eyes never left his face. You got shot, she said softly. For me? Yeah, he replied, reloading with shaky hands. That's what leaders do. Remember, her ears twitched, and then she laughed, even while bleeding. You really are ours now. The rest of the squad arrived seconds later. Forming a tight circle around them, the Fox girls hissed, eyes glowing, tails flared in warning. They looked feral, beautiful, and deadly. Jocks saw something shift in their faces. Not fear, not panic fury. For the first time, they weren't fighting to survive. They were fighting to protect one of their own. Kari whispered something in her native tongue, and the others howled as one. It wasn't a war cry. It was a pack call, together. They pushed forward, claws, tails, blades, and rage. The last of the Mercs fell screaming, dragged into the dark by fast-moving shadows. When silence returned, Jocks stood slowly, his arm around Kari. The base was ruined, scorched, but alive. So were they. You okay? He asked her. She leaned into him, smirking through the pain. I'm bleeding all over your chest. He looked down, half smiling. Looks better with red anyway. Ree ran over and pressed something into Jox's hand. It was another handmade charm, this one shaped like a claw wrapped around a heart. "You're not just Alpha anymore," she said. "You're family now." Jox looked around at the dirty, tired, wounded girls, staring at him with something close to worship. He didn't know what to say. So he said the only thing that felt true, "Then let's make sure no one ever takes that away from us again." The attack had passed, but Moonbase 12 didn't feel safe anymore. The halls were cracked, scorched, and quiet. Lights flickered, smoke drifted through vents, and blood still marked the floors. Jox sat alone in the command room, arm bandaged, chest tight. His team was alive, but something didn't sit right. That attack wasn't random. It was sent with a purpose. He pulled up his clearance files, eyes scanning across restricted military logs. Most were lock-top security, need-to-know access only, but Jox had served long enough to know how to break the wall. With a few bypass codes and a shaky breath, the screen blinked red, then opened. Project Vixen Confidential. His fingers froze over the keys as the file loaded. Images flashed on-screen: test tubes, labs. Young girls with furred ears locked in glass cells. Notes marked them by number, not name. VXN03. Failed combat obedience. VXN07. Aggression too high, discard. VXN09. Subject showed emotional attachment, unstable, terminate if signs repeat. Jox clenched his jaw, heart sinking. These weren't just recruits, they were experiments. Created, tested, discarded like weapons on a shelf. He saw Kari's photo, much younger, wild-eyed, covered in scratches. VXN01, capable of leadership but unpredictable. His fists slammed the desk. They never cared about these girls. They never planned to keep them alive after the war. A soft sound behind him made him turn fast. Kari stood in the doorway, eyes narrowed. "You found it," she said. "Not surprised, just tired." Jox nodded. Silent, Kari walked in slowly. Every step, careful, like she carried a storm inside. "I was 6 when they put me in the tank," she said, her voice flat. "I didn't know what warm food was until I escaped for 2 days and ate off the floor." Jox looked at her, heart burning. "Why didn't you tell me?" Kari tilted her head. "Would it have changed anything?" "Yes," he said without pause. "It would have made me fight harder for you." That stopped her for a moment. Her tail twitched, ears lowered, and her expression broke. Just for a second, she looked like a child again, not a soldier. "They called us defective when we showed feelings," she said, when Ree cried. "They threatened to shock her. When I protected her, they called me unstable." She walked to the screen and stared at her own file. "Alpha," she said softly, "do you still think we're just a squad?" Jox stood up, walked over, and put a hand on her shoulder. "No," he whispered. "You're a family, and I'll burn every system that says otherwise." Kari turned to him then, eyes wet but fierce. "And if they come again?" she asked. "If they say we belong to them, will you let them take us?" He didn't blink. "I'll put my life between you and them." She stared at him for a long moment, then stepped forward, not to fight, not to mock, but to press her forehead gently against his chest. A gesture of bond, of trust, of something deeper than "You're not just our Alpha anymore," she whispered. "You're mine." Later that night, the others gathered in the sleeping bay. Silent, waiting, Kari stood in front of them and shared the truth about the files, the project, the lies. None of them looked surprised, but hearing it spoken aloud, it made the room colder. Ree was the first to speak. "So they made us just to throw us away." Jox knelt beside her, looked each of them in the eyes. "They made you, but they don't own you," he said. "You're not weapons. You're people." One by one, they nodded. Not with joy, but with strength. They had spent years as shadows, science projects, broken tools. Now they had a name, a choice, a protector. Kari stepped beside Jocks, voice firm. "We were born in labs." She said, "But we'll die as free fighters before we ever wear a chain again." The squad howled together, low and sharp, not wild. This time, but united, like soldiers ready for war. Like daughters ready to protect their home. Jocks looked around the room at these fox girls once called defects. And he made a silent promise. Whoever tried to take them again would meet the fury of the alpha they chose. The emergency repairs on Moonbase 12 were still incomplete. Wires hung from the ceilings, smoke leaked from vents, and the cold air smelled like burnt steel. But inside the heart of the base, something stronger than metal was being built. Trust. The Fox girls moved like a real squad now. Not just trained, but bonded. Their eyes followed Jocks, not out of fear, but choice. Their tails flicked in rhythm. As they marched behind him during drills, even Kari stayed close, walking silently at his left side like a shadow and a shield. But peace never lasts, in places built on lies. It came quietly, just a coded message on Jocks' personal screen. Order 77 initiated DAL VXN units to be decommissioned immediately. His heart dropped. He read it again, hoping it was a mistake. It wasn't. Command had discovered he accessed the Project Vixen files. Now they were sending a full replacement squad to clean up loose assets. Which meant one thing. They were coming to kill the girls, every one of them. Kari entered the room and stopped when she saw his face. "What happened?" she asked sharply, tail stiff, eyes narrowing. Jocks turned the screen toward her without a word. She read the message once, then again, her jaw tightened, her ears lowered. But she didn't look surprised, just tired. "I told you," she said softly. "They never planned to let us live." Jocks stood up slowly, voice low and heavy. "They're sending soldiers to do an entire unit." Arriving in 24 hours, the air changed. Kari looked him straight in the eye. "Then we fight." He gathered the girls in the command room. They sat close together, tense but unafraid. Jocks looked at each of them, the youngest, clutching her handmade charm, Mira, always quiet, her tail wrapped tight around her waist. Even the strongest Kari wasn't hiding the heat behind her eyes. "They're coming to erase you," he said simply. "They call it a recall." "No?" One cried. They had heard worse things, lived through darker truths. But Jocks saw something shift. They weren't scared. They were angry. Kari stepped forward, looked at her team, then back at him. "If you want to leave," she said, "we won't stop you." Jocks didn't hesitate. "I'm not going anywhere." Silence fell again. Then Ree spoke, her voice shaking. "If we die, will they forget us?" "No," Jocks said, kneeling beside her. "Because I won't let the world forget." He held up a small device, a hidden camera drone. "We stream everything, every order they give, every shot they fire. If we fall, the galaxy will see who they really are." Kari smiled for the first time that day, a sharp, fierce grin. "Then, let's give them a show." For the next 12 hours, they fortified the base. Traps were set, power rerouted, false corridors activated. Jocks helped them build not as a commander but as part of the pack. Kari and Mira worked side by side, planting pulse bombs near the main entrance. Rebuilt a hidden nest above the medbay with sniper tools and broken sensors. They moved like ghosts, preparing to defend their only home. That night, as they rested, Kari approached Jocks privately. She looked at him for a long moment, then handed him something, a small cloth band marked with her clan symbol, once burned off during lab tests. She tied it gently around his wrist. "Now you're one of us," she whispered, "not just Alpha." But family, Jocks didn't speak. He only nodded, holding her hand for a second longer than he needed to. That single moment spoke more than words. The next morning, The base shuddered. Enemy transports had landed. Moonbase 12 was now a battlefield through the cracked windows. They saw black armored soldiers marching. Official insignia sent by their own government. Last chance to run, Jock said with a half smile. Kari cracked her knuckles, eyes glowing gold. We don't run anymore. Jox lifted his rifle and stood beside her. Readjusted her scope. Mira powered up the base grid. The Fox girls fell into formation. Strong, fast, united, they had been. Made to obey, they had been trained to kill. But now, for the first time ever, they chose who to protect. And they chose Jox. They chose each other. They chose freedom. Asterisk, the sirens blared across Moonbase 12. Dust rose from the ground as enemy. Boots hit the surface. The Fox girls stood ready, silent, steady, eyes sharp. Jox stood at the front. His arms still wrapped in Kari's cloth band, his grip tight on his rifle across the view window. Rows of soldiers in black armor moved in formation. They weren't mercenaries this time. They were official units, government cleanup squads. Their job was simple: erase the evidence, destroy the past. That meant wiping out every Fox girl and anyone who stood with them. But Jox wasn't standing in front of the squad this time. He was standing with them, beside them, two squads approaching North Gate. Mira said, eyes locked on the motion sensor. Another group setting up heavy weapons on the South Ridge. Kari narrowed her eyes. We hit first. Hit fast and vanish. Right, Jock said. We don't hold ground, we break their rhythm. The Fox girls all nodded once. No hesitation. They weren't soldiers by training. They were survivors turned warriors by choice. Ree slid into the upper vents, her sniper tool locked and ready. Mira rewired the floor panels to blast when stepped on. Kari stood beside Jox's, claws flexed, tail twitching with energy. Then the lights cut. The first blast shook the base as the enemy breached the front doors. Sparks flew, smoke rolled in. It had begun. The Fox girls moved like lightning. Kari took point, leaping through the smoke and slicing through two soldiers before they even raised their guns. Ree shot cracked from above, taking out a squad leader in a single blink. Myra dropped from a hidden panel and kicked a power core, sending electric shockwaves through enemy lines. Jox covered the rear, precise and calm, putting bullets exactly where they needed to go. One soldier grabbed at Ree. Jox shot the attacker's arm clean off before she could even scream. He rushed to her, shielding her with his body. You okay? He asked. She nodded fast. I didn't think you'd see me. I see everything, Jock said with a grin. Helping her back into position, that's what alphas do, as the battle raged. More soldiers poured into many, too fast. They had drones now, dropping stun bombs and gas clouds. One hit near Kari, knocking her back against a wall. Coughing hard, vision spinning, Jox reached her before anyone else, pulled her behind a collapsed table. Held her close. Carry Kari, stay with me, he said, shaking her gently. Her eyes fluttered, then focused on his face. I'm fine, she growled. Don't cry over me. I'm not crying, he said, voice shaking. But if you die, I'll break every law in the galaxy. She smirked through the pain. Then you better help me up. Outside, a transport ship hovered, low loudspeakers blaring. Commander Jox Grayson, stand down immediately. Return the subjects or face military court and execution. Jox grabbed a nearby mic and snarled back. You already sent that order? We're not your subjects anymore. Kari climbed beside him, her voice cutting through the noise. You want us? Come, take us. The final push began. The enemy charged the central control room, the heart of the base. But the Fox girls were waiting one final line of defense, claws sharp, eyes glowing. Jock stepped forward, raised a grenade, and threw it straight into the advancing line. The shockwave dropped half their front units. And in that opening, the Fox girls attacked. No more running, no more hiding. Kari leaped from the second level, landed in the center of the enemy group, and spun like a storm. Ree dropped 3 more drones from above, clearing the air Jox used. Carrie's tail is cover, yes. Her tail land dropped 2 more soldiers in sync with her movement. They didn't fight like man and aliens anymore. They fought like a pack, like one body. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. Smoke curled through the halls, and silence fell. Not the silence of death, but survival. Bodies lay scattered, the enemy gone. The base, still standing barely, Jox stood in the middle of it all, bleeding, bruised, but alive. Kari limped to him, falling into his chest with a tired laugh. "We won," she whispered. "We actually won." He held her tightly. "You did more than win," he said softly. "You showed them what it means to fight free." Mira, Ree, and the others gathered around, touching his jacket, wrapping tails around each other. They weren't just survivors now. They were legends. And Joxy wasn't just Alpha anymore. He was their home. Asterisk Moon Base 12 was quiet. For the first time in its history, was silent not because of fear, but because the war was over. The cleanup crews from the outer colonies arrived 3 days later. They weren't soldiers, just repair teams and medical staff. Their orders were simple: document the damage and offer aid. They came expecting bodies, destruction, disaster. What they found was something no report could explain. 10 Fox girls standing in front of the base, proud and calm, and 1 human, tired, limping, but still standing beside them like a rock in the wind. The broadcast Jox had sent before the battle had gone viral, across colonies, across planets. Across borders, it showed soldiers firing on children. It showed the truth of Project Vixen. And it showed 1 human who stood between death and the ones forgotten by war. The public reaction was fierce. Protests shook the Capitol. Voices screamed for justice. In the end, High Command had no choice but to shut the project down. They called it an unauthorized experiment. They called the Fox girls victims of a rogue faction. They lied again, this time to save face, but Jox didn't care. Because for once, the girls were safe. Jox left the military. He turned in his badge, his rank. And every medal they once gave him, he didn't want any of it anymore. He bought a small farm on a quiet planet in neutral space. Not much, just a hill, a house, and a sky full of stars. But it was his, and soon it became theirs. Kari was the first to arrive. She wore his old military jacket like it was armor. Didn't say much, just dropped her bag and curled up by the fireplace like she belonged there. Because she did, the others came one by one. Ree brought 3 wild puppies and somehow convinced Jox to keep them. Mira showed up with books and tools and a head full of plans for turning the barn into a training dojo. Every week, another girl appeared, till the house was full of laughter, footsteps, tales, and warmth. One evening, Jox stood on the porch, watching Kari hang laundry under the sunset. The light caught her silver hair and the edges of her ears. She didn't know he was looking. She just moved peacefully. Her body relaxed in a way he'd never seen at the base. When she turned and caught his gaze, she smiled. Not the fierce smirk of the battlefield, but the soft, private one that only he ever saw.
Oh.
"You're staring again?" she said playfully. "Can't help it," Jox replied, walking down to her. "You look like freedom," Kari laughed, a gentle sound, and flicked her tail at him. "You look like home," she whispered back. They stood there in silence, the soft wind carrying the smell of trees and clean air. No alarms, no shouting, no gunfire, just the sound of belonging. Later that night, the Fox girls sat around a fire. Outside, they roasted stolen marshmallows and passed around handmade trinkets. Jox sat in the middle, letting Ree braid part of his hair while Kari leaned against his arm. They didn't talk about the war. They talked about names, real ones. Each girl had chosen her own, not numbers or codes. They laughed as they shared them like children inventing stories under the stars. Kari stood at the end and held up a small carved stone. It was shaped like a circle with 10 points and one center. "Our old squad badge," she said. "We made it together." She walked to Jocks and pressed it into his hand. "You kept us alive," she said, her voice steady, "but more than that. You gave us a future." Jocks looked around, eyes stinging just a little, not from smoke, but from something deeper. These girls, once weapons, now daughters, friends, sisters. They had found something no lab could design: a pack, a purpose, a home. That night, as the fire faded and stars moved across the sky, Kari curled up beside Jocks on the porch, her tail wrapped around his leg. She looked up at him and whispered, "Alpha, this is home now." And Jocks, after all the battles, after all the lies, for the first time in his life, he believed it too.